Hi there. Hope you've been keeping cool as possible. It's pretty hot today, wasn't it? Apparently, it's going to cool down the rest of the week, but this isn't a weather forecast. Anyway, but hopefully it will. Been watching quite a lot of videos in relationship to Nurse Lucy Letby and the miscarriage of justice. Obviously, heard about the unfortunate rejection of Colin Norris's appeal. Um, I I think some people have been thinking, and I had as well, and been hoping that had that appeal been accepted, it could have worked also to help Lucy Letby. But I think in the longer run, as it's turned out the way it has, it may be that it will work the other way around. That once Lucy Letby is exonerated, it will lead to a series of certainly some of those other cases of nurses that have been in prison for a long time having their cases reviewed and retried, and exoneration should follow there, I would imagine, in most of those cases. Perhaps it will work that way round, but I think we were hoping it could have been a bit of a help to Lucy Letby, and obviously primarily to Colin Norris himself, of course. I've been thinking a little bit about, and this is just a reiteration of some things that I talked about a long time ago, back in 2023, and I know other people have since, of course, and at the time as well, but it's just coming up in my mind again as to, what are they concerned about now in terms of the exoneration? What would fall out of an exoneration? Because it is going to happen, but what would make them not want to do it? Obviously the idea of reputational damage against all these institutions, the whole justice system itself, possibly leading to exonerations of other people who've also had miscarriages of justice in similar circumstances, i.e. they worked in hospitals. So we're looking at obviously Ben Geen, Colin Norris, Victorina Chu. I don't know much about. I've only really ever watched a documentary about Colin Norris. That seems to me to be a very suspicious or very unsafe conviction there. But it's not just that. It's not just that the powers that be, the establishment, are concerned about. Now, exactly who's concerned? I think they're all concerned, really. I mean, the NHS are concerned, the government are concerned. And the thing I go back to, something which I was, as I say, was mentioning a long time ago, is what would fall out of this. And especially now, it's changed, it's magnified it since the Shuley and the panel, since their reports. So think of it like this, perhaps. Once Lucy Letby is exonerated, pretty much all the families of all the babies that had been on the indictment will then be seeking, quite naturally, recompense and compensation for failures, medical failures, trust failures as a whole. Individual doctors need to be brought to accountability, but the trust as a whole, the NHS as a whole. But it won't stop there, and that's my sort of contention about it, is that it will open a floodgate, really, or it will be perhaps a better analogy is the old domino effect, because it will make people from who have all over the country, whatever the trust is that they've had, perhaps they've lost a baby in a neonatal unit. It will create such a scandal about that particular hospital. I mean, it's kind of an open. It's not a secret now anyway what it was like. But Lucy Letby's conviction, wrongful conviction, is kind of keeping it there, as though that hospital was all the lies that they told, all the babies were fine and the hospital was doing quite well, and if it wasn't for the the quote unquote serial killer, we would have never known any problems with the Countess of Chester Hospital, which is clearly nonsense. So I think what will happen is that, yes, Lucy Letby has to be hugely compensated. You can't really ever compensate for what they've done to her and her family and friends by extension, and what they've done to those parents as well. But they'll need to be compensated in relationship to, and not just them, not just the families that are related to babies that came to be on the indictment. How many more will need to come into play, as it were, perhaps the wrong phrase, but to be looked into in terms of medical negligence cases, as it were. We know from the FOI that I requested, we know that as of 2024, Countess of Chester instituted a separate code for, now I don't know whether to call them medical negligence cases, but they are sort of live disputes, as it were, as to care. Now, whether because they haven't reached the end and haven't been solved, as it were, there are at least 18 of them. Now, how far they go back, do some of them go back to the period in question, 2015, 2016? We don't know. Prior to that, I think they were subsumed into the obstetrics, I'm calling them as a shorthand, medical negligence cases, or they depends how they end up being resolved. Just because a case is brought doesn't necessarily mean, does it, that that ends up being the decision made that it was medical negligence, or failures of medical care, shall we say, at whatever level. So there's 18 going on, as we know, that we know of already, and once Lucy Letby is exonerated, there'll be a whole lot more needed to be added to that. But it's the knock-on effect to other trusts all over the country, the domino effect. Is it an exaggeration to consider that it could actually reach billions and billions of pounds of claims once that domino effect, if indeed it did happen, and if there were legitimate cases to bring, because everything would be put under an absolute spotlight then. I'm talking about, obviously, the whole of neonatal care and obstetrics would be put on an absolute spotlight across the country. And obviously there'll be a lot of legal firms seeking to represent families, if they've got any concerns going back however long, Is it possible that that's part of the fear of the establishment and the NHS as a whole, and the way the NHS is politicised, the idea that it could amount to a bill, as it were, or a complete a sense that people have no faith in those services anymore, and that there will be a literal cost of billions and billions of pounds? Is that possible? I think it could be. We start to look at the figures that just Countess of Chester of Hospital have paid out. It's huge amounts, tens and tens of millions of pounds, and that's only one department. But if you multiplied that by every neonatal unit in the country, I'm not saying every one would be or is being run like the Countess of Chester was being run. But as we know, and as Dr. McLachlan did those comparative studies and comparing hospitals, like there was the Sherwood Hospital and there's one in Blackpool, they had similar spikes, quote unquote spikes, over a similar period. In fact, there was one that was a slightly greater relative spike, as it were. So what was going on there? Are we supposed to think, well, nothing's going on there, but it could just open it. The way I'm wondering whether there's meetings that have been going on, and they say, well, look, what's going to fall out of this? It's huge. The reputational damage. I mean, not that it's got a great reputation anyway, or a good reputation of the justice system, the whole idea of expert evidence needs to be completely overhauled. The jury system, I mean, they're gonna have a go at that aspect of it. The CPS, the police, of course, and the NHS, and this is where it can just mount up and up and up and up. It's almost as though I'm just thinking there've been private meetings of people in power and politicians, basically, ministers, talking about this case. That's my supposition, and saying, we can see where this is going. How do we control the fallout from this? How do we manage this? How can we manage this? And would that amount to the CCRC being lent on to stall it as much as they can until the powers that be, whoever they are exactly, have got a plan in place about how to manage this explosion or implosion, whatever way you want to describe it, that would happen following an exoneration, both in relationship to the justice system, but very much in relationship to, obviously, neonatal services across the board, really, and how it might open up potentially hundreds or thousands of claims going back many years, that haven't been brought or would not have been brought before, but this has shone such a spotlight on what has gone wrong at that particular hospital. It just leads to people that are in the catchment area of other trusts, hooking up with solicitors that are specialised in that area and looking into their own particular cases. And I think it could, how many trusts are there? There's a huge number, aren't there? It could result in billions of pounds, and I think they're aware of that. I think some very so-called high up people, people in power in whatever sense, Department of Health, are they involved? Just a quick sort of, not an anecdote, but a story, really, just in very short form. My friend and I came very, very close to bringing a judicial review in relation to a certain aspect of the NHS, the result of which, had we been allowed to bring the case, would have resulted in potential, it would have meant billions of pounds in terms of, it's hard to talk about it without talking about it. It's to do with the CHC system, CHC, continuing healthcare. And we had a barrister who gave their assessment of it and gave and it was expressed as a percentage of the likelihood of winning it, and it was described as a good chance of winning the judicial review. But I didn't have the money, we didn't have the money to bring it ourselves privately, and so we were relying on legal aid, and it would have amounted to something in the order of £150,000 to bring it. That was the estimate that was given to us, and I absolutely believe that legal aid giving body was lent on by the Department of Health to quash it, because they realised that it was such a threat to that system. So the reason why I tell that story is because of how I think these governmental departments will be highly involved in this, and I think the Department of Health will be, or whomsoever it is within that department, and the responsible. Who is it? I've forgotten who it is now. Is it that Wes Streeting, the ghastly? Well, they're all ghastly anyway in my book. But anyway, I think they've had meetings about this. I think they're aware of it. That it's not just about a matter of overturning a miscarriage of justice. It explodes in all directions, and it means potentially billions of pounds, I think. But they also know they can't square that circle by just allowing it by just allowing it just to fester, as it were, and to continue. I think they'd like to. They'd like to do that. They'd like to do that as much as Hughes would, as much as Evans would like it to happen, as much as Jayaram and Breary and all that motley crew of hideous characters. They all want that to happen, and power wants that to happen, but it also knows it's got to be realistic at some level, and reality is going to be hitting them upside the face, and it already is, really. And that's where it's interesting about David Davis's involvement. Again, it's a supposition, could be completely wrong, but I'm imagining there's some inside track stuff going on there that we've got no idea about, but that my supposition is that it's about the discussion about how you manage the fallout from it, and that's where they're at with it. It's the idea that they've got this hands-off approach from the CCRCL. They just got to let them get on with it, and you've got the separation of powers. No, behind the scenes, they're all in it together. I've always suspected that and Duckingstall did a focus on Goss in a recent video, brilliant video, and as other people have done as well. Liberated Mind and Stuart Gillum and other people have as well, of course. Lucy Letby analysis and so many others. And where was I? I've forgotten. I'm not used to it. Not used to speaking off the cuff. The kind of that in their world, they're horrified by this. Not that it's an injustice. That doesn't horrify them. They're not horrified that it's an injustice. The powers that be, the mandarins, whatever you want to call them, in Whitehall or whatever, that are dealing with this, and having conversations with people in that whole legal system as well. There's no real separation at that level, I don't believe at all. Not for a second. Not for a second. Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think someone like Goss was chosen anyway as the right person for the job. Sounds like his kind of job. It sounded like Goss's kind of job in the same way that it sounded like Evans's kind of job. You know what I mean? And it sounded like Nicholas Johnson's kind of job, or case, or whatever you want to call it. It's all these people. There was a large element of orchestration. Can I prove it? No, but I just, it's intuition. That's how I feel about it. I'll always feel that way about it. I don't. No, there's more orchestration than we can possibly imagine. That's my point of view. I mean, yes, there are. The cock-ups happen. I get all that, and now and again, but I think there's a lot more construction happens, especially when there's back to the money issue. And this is where, back to the older videos I did back in 2023, and I was doing this video about follow the money as a 2-part thing, and then this Lucy Letby, another story, I think it was called, like an 8 or 9-part thing about that, and it always kept coming back to money, and obviously the cost of bringing the case in the first place, we're into, and they're still spending money on it now, and Thirlwall as well. We're looking at, have they spent 100 million on the whole lot so far? Quite possibly, and quite a lot of people have made a lot of money out of it as well. A lot of people have made a lot of money out of it, and it's not just about embarrassment for them, because there's no, like I said in the last video, it's not about, their soul isn't going to be rent in pieces, or their heart's not going to be broken by it, because they're not in that mindset, these kind of characters that are concerned about this. It's about money and protecting institutions, protecting other individuals, how they manage the, I don't know what to call it, the sequelae, what happens after the exoneration. It won't just go away. It's not like, as terrible as some cases are, about an individual crime, and they're terrible in their own terms, of course. But this is about a system. These are about whole systems, obviously, and the the outcome of it is incalculable, both financially, but also in terms of people's, how they value the reputation and things, and their positions within these worlds. Um, there's a bit of an echo of, in the same way that those ghastly crew of consultants scapegoated someone, it's just been echoed all the way through it again and again. The scapegoating continues, and I don't know how to describe it. It's a network of people that, at very high levels, what would want the scapegoating to continue at all costs, but know really at this stage that it's not going to be feasible. It's not going to be feasible. But they would want the scapegoating to continue. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, but there's a lot of amazing. I mean, I haven't been on Twitter for months. I'm not on Twitter anymore. So, but I remember Mark McDonald saying that he was hoping to hear by the early summer, wasn't he? And we're in July tomorrow, so hopefully we will hear something, something positive. But just to go back about the theme about why I wanted to make this video, is that it's not really, I don't think it's about everyone else who's concerned about this, and everyone is at a very high, quote unquote, high levels in the government and in the civil service, Department of Health. It's not about we'll just let the CCRC get on with it, and it's not about the CCRC just working independently. There's all kinds of meetings being had and conversations being had already about how they do this. I suppose one initial question will be, how can we stop it? Is there a feasible way to deny it, to deny what the application that's been made? Can you do it and make it look? There's been meetings where they've said to the representative of the CCRC, whoever it is, or who's instructing them effectively, and saying, can you make it look plausible that you're going to deny everything that Shu Lee and the panel and Mark McDonald's whole submission is? Can you make it even plausible? Because you've got to come up with an answer about why you're going to reject it, and and we're kind of charging you that if you are going to reject it, it's going to be absolutely absurd, and they know they're in a cleft stick. In other words, so one tactic is waiting, is like buying time. And with something like the CCRC, you don't even need to buy time with them. They're just like glacial anyway, aren't they? In this, for very obvious reasons, really. It's all deliberate. Nothing's accidental about it. But anyway, I'll leave it there before I'm lose, probably a bit unfocused anyway. But I think that's where it is. I think there all kinds of meetings and discussions going on, and that David Davis probably is party to some extent, that he obviously doesn't want to reveal. I don't know that. I mean, I assume that's the case, and even perhaps Lucy Letby's legal team as well, that they know it's. I'm sorry to say it. It's a game, It's a horrific game, or it's a kind of it's warfare, but it's also a game to a lot of those people, and they're worried about what's gonna happen as a result of it. So it's the machinations that go on to try to ensure the minimal effect of it before it happens. I think that's where they're at, strategizing. How do we How could we shut this off? Who do we blame? Who can we blame for it all, really? I mean, it's a massive hit for them to take. That's the way they look at it. That's the way the system looks at it. It's a massive hit for them to take. The terrible Vista thing, or the awful Vista, whatever that Pratt said. That corrupt Pratt in the wig said that all that time ago. They just take it as, a jolly bad show. It's a jolly bad show, that, isn't it? We had to bite the bullet there, and we had to free an innocent person. Jolly bad show. Jolly bad show. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Thanks very much for listening, and take care and keep cool. And hopefully it'll be a bit cooler tomorrow, but perhaps some of you like it really hot. I can't do it anymore. Can't do the heat that much anymore. Take care and good night. Bye-bye.